crop top interview.
Got you. Hey, welcome to the podcast, Emily.
Oh, thank you so much.
Just to introduce you to the audience, who do you say you are?
Who do I say I am? I'm just a human being who messed up in my life and made a comeback. And, now I use that kind of trial, failure, and error to help others come back from their setbacks, essentially. And that's through popcorn.
I was reading a little bit about your I guess how you came into the popcorn. Can you tell me a little bit about that? How'd you decide on popcorn and just use it as a way to get out of the label that might have been placed on you?
Yeah, so my setback was actually prison, and this was federal prison. And I ended up there after I'd gone on a trip with someone that I knew and trusted, and I found out that we had to bring drugs back. And, of course, people are like, oh, well, why didn't you just not do it? And it's like, well, when you're in another country and you don't know anyone, you just kind of want to go home. So, and I didn't also know like the repercussions, but even if I did know the repercussions, doesn't matter. I still wanted to go home, right? So it's when you're in another country, like there's not really much that you can do. And I just didn't want to put myself at any more risk, because if I didn't comply, and I didn't want to put my family at risk. So I just did it, failed horribly, and then pled guilty to importing. And so in prison, I realized how much food brought people together and how it brought a sense of community and calm and collectiveness. And also, it also brought out people's like anxieties of re-entering the workforce, and, myself included, just because there is a lot of stigma. There is a lot of like non-belief in people's ability to thrive after prison, or there's just, this cookie cutter image that people have in their minds about people that have been incarcerated. And so after getting to know so many people and knowing how I got there myself, I knew that, we aren't bad people. We just were in a bad situation. And, we also have to learn from these things and take responsibility for, the things that we need to take responsibility for, which is essentially our future. And in my case, it was my substance use. So I took responsibility for that. And popcorn was a popular prison snack. And though I mean everything kind of was a popular prison snack, but
Yeah.
we like to eat a lot. But we would like put different like combinations of spices on the popcorn, and I would always just like get different things off the canteen, like whether that was like a jar of peanut butter or like, Kraft Dinner. I'd get the cheese and put the cheese on the popcorn, and I kind of like put two and two together. And I was like, why don't I start a company? Well, not just a company, but start a social enterprise, really, where I can employ myself, because I know I'm capable of doing good in the world, but also employ other people that have been incarcerated, and kind of just crush the stigma I like to say one kernel at a time.
I like that. I guess I don't know too much about prison, but I don't want to linger on that too much. But I was just curious,
Sure.
How did you come up with popcorn? Because I'd heard a podcast called Ear Hustle out
Yes,
of
yeah, that's
San
Quentin.
Quentin, and
Yeah,
I really like a lot of the stories that they gave through it, like giving people like having people be able to tell their stories, and also giving people on the outside kind of an idea of what goes on the inside. And it's like food, from what I remember from a couple of episodes, isn't like you don't have the best options, so to speak, depending on where you're at. But I guess it could be like a tier down from school lunches for people that ate school lunches. So
yeah.
I guess out of all the things that, like the creative ideas and things like that, how did you land on popcorn or come across popcorn?
So popcorn was available for purchase through Canteen.
Hmm.
It was like a bulk bag of kernels, a little plastic bag like that for like a couple bucks or something, I don't know. And then because obviously, prices are inflated in prison. So people, the people that own the prisons or own the companies that provide food to the prisons can make money. But then also in federal prison in Canada, I was in a medium unit and then eventually a minimum unit. So in those kinds of units, we actually have a kitchen and like a refrigerator. So we get like a certain amount of food every week. And in these kind of food drop-offs, we have a little bit of choice into like what we want. Like say if you're vegetarian or whatever, you want cheese or like, you can, but you have like a very limited budget. I think it's like $30 worth of like 2022 prices of food. So I guess I guess it was 2018 at the time, but so you know you are pretty limited, but part of that selection of the grocery was like certain spices. You know, you could get like garlic or salt, pepper. You could get dill. You could get like paprika, and they came in these little like they're already pre-portioned amounts,
Mhm.
like little containers. And so like I've always liked popcorn, but I also didn't want to like just put butter on it every time. You know, you're in prison, you have limited exercise. I like to exercise and I like to be mindful kind of what I eat. Like, you know, I like to eat junk food, but I also like to eat healthy most of the time, and just to avoid like a binge or something like that. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
never good when you're in an environment where, you know, there's a lot of anxiety and limited exercise or everything like that. So yeah, I wanted to have a healthier option. And so I began to put the spices on it. You know, I'd put like, you know, chili powder and salt, or
Mhm.
chili powder and sugar. I even put like sriracha sauce on it, like melted sriracha sauce and sugar,
That's
which was really
different.
good. Yeah, it was like a liquid version. Oh, and then I did a honey sriracha, which is like honey, just melted honey
Yeah.
and sriracha. And it was like, you know, it didn't like last very long because it made it kind of wilted after a while, but it was still good.
Yeah.
And that's kind of how I came across it. And I also knew that popcorn was like, everyone was familiar with popcorn. So it wouldn't be like I was bringing this
Mhm.
brand new food product into the world with this brand new idea.
Right.
But prison reform wasn't really brand new. It had actually seen a lot of forward action in the last, you know, 5-6 years.
Mm.
Right. Even like, you know, looking at the work of reform by like, you know, Meek Mill, Jay-Z, like you're starting to see a lot of influential people really making big changes, and, you know, working with lawmakers and everything like that. So I think I was in prison at a good time where this reform was actually, you know, making sense,
Right.
just because of the economic disparities, and, you know, just like there's so many unfair factors that disproportionately affect different groups that go to prison.
Right.
So
But that
um,
it's good to hear something positive come out of like a hard place, where a lot of times it's like you always hear the scary stories, or like you said, like being able to come out and then wonder, okay, like how do I get away from where I was before and kind of put myself in a better situation, or get around people to where they're not like labeling me and being like, oh, this is all I was, this is all I'd ever be. Um, I spoke with a friend of mine that I've known for a couple of years, and he spent I think some of his adolescence in prison, and he talked a lot about having like becoming a different person before he got out, and just having like the different types of mind shifts. Like what was it like for you? How did you view yourself differently from the time that
um,
you went, or like since that period in your life?
yeah, I think I've always been a positive person, but I also needed to be like kind of pissed off at myself for a bit and be sad, and you know, you can't just be like, oh, everything's fine, it's gonna be fine, when you've actually, you know, impacted people's lives. Like my
Mm.
parents and my whole family, like they suffered a lot, and they still did everything they could for me, but they are also like they were very firm. Like they were just like, you know what, Emily, we love you, but we can't deal with any more substance use. Like this is like literally the last straw. And that was kind of like what kicked me into gear. And, you know, you can either take feistiness for good, or you can take this, you know, the energy that we have, and this feistiness, and you can use it for bad things or good things. And so I went in there just wanting to like fight for something, and I not fight for in a bad way, not fight against it, but we're like fight with it, like spar with the system kind of thing.
Mm.
And I was like, because I know that I'm not going to let this beat me, because I know that I look back on the rest of my life, instead of looking forward and pretending like the past didn't exist. I looked out back on the past, and I was like, holy shit, like, oh, sorry, I swear,
No,
but
you're
I was like,
fine. You're fine.
I was like, holy shit, like, I'm not this shitty person that I say on a piece of paper, but sometimes you have to realize that you have hurt people, and you have
Mm.
to realize that you have to put an effort into repairing those relationships, and they aren't handouts, right? So it's that's what also was part of my like success, or I guess, you know, incremental success, because I realized that it was going to be possible, but I also had work to do, and I had apologies I had to address, and put work into, and, you know, not have the victim mentality. So
Mm. That's powerful. I
oh,
oh, one sec. But I like what you said about not having the victim mentality, because
mhm.
just given what's happened within the last few years around different countries around the world, so to speak,
Yeah.
there's been more than enough excuses to say, okay, like things aren't going my way. Let me just pack my bags and go home, or sit in my room and complain. But what's this year? What's 2022 been like for you?
Well, this year we've actually expanded a lot, not just in the kind of popcorn range, but in the mission range.
Mhm.
So now I've been doing like a lot of talks at schools. I've been working with like wardens and like social innovation companies to kind of amplify and scale the mission, which is, there's one thing called, what's it called? Let me find it. I just kind of started working with a company called the John Howard Society, and it's called the Fair Chances Coalition. So this is basically you take the pledge as an organization to kind of implement fair chance hiring, right? So
Gotcha.
now, because I'm going to be a partner with John Howard Society, I'm going to be able to help work with other corporations and get them to implement these fair chance hiring policies. Because even though we hire people within, we can't
Yeah.
hire everyone, and we want to, right? So it's
Right.
it's kind of like the the difficulties of like building a small business, right? You barely hire yourself for the first little bit. So you got to kind of, still address the mission that you want to address through proof. And, we have a great internal team, but also be able to scale it as well. And so I think working with other corporations and helping them implement better policies so that it's more even playing field, then I think that's definitely going to help. And, working now, I've been working with organizations also in the US now. We just kind of did a partnership with Pivot Baltimore. So they're like a women-led charity that basically helps women coming out of prison in different ways through like workshops or assisted living or anything like that. So it's great. So expanding it through scale with other corporate organizations, because I think corporations have a role to play, and then
Mhm.
also working with organizations, not for profits or philanthropic ones that help from in a grassroots way.
Gotcha. I guess what's been one of the highlights of the work that you've been able to do, or just some of the things you've been able to enjoy in your life this year?
I think, well, I just got nominated for a Women of Empowerment Award, so that's like
Mm.
a pretty heavy hitter award up in Toronto here, which is great because I've won a finalist award for Outstanding Business Award, and then I also won Entrepreneur of the Year category 2 years ago in my hometown Hamilton. So now I
Nice.
got nominated for an award in Toronto, which is awesome. Um, but also, I 2 days ago was probably like a big highlight. I was in Kingston, Ontario, and they used to have a prison there, and they actually invited me up to do like a meet and greet. And they like sell the popcorn in the shop now. So I think a lot of people are really interested in these reform initiatives and like seeing that people can do better. Like people want to see people do well.
Yeah.
Like I know there are like obviously lots of incidents that happen that have victims, and the victims in this case obviously want, you want some sort of revenge or whatever, and that's everyone has their own kind of way of dealing with how they've been harmed.
Yeah.
But I think for the most part, we're starting to see lots more things called like restorative justice, which is like working from the perpetrator and the victim, and sometimes there's no victim. So it's like I think, but all in all, I think a lot of people really want to see people do better and people not to suffer.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely going in the right direction.
Have you found yourself having an easier time with empathy, like being like more understanding of other people, where like if you're in a group, some people would be like, oh, that person's an idiot. It's like, maybe.
You know what? I think like I always had compassion, but I also was one of those people that never thought I'd be in prison. So
Mm.
after this whole thing happened to me, it really opened up my eyes to how many different ways that people can become incarcerated, whether there's motive or not.
Right.
Usually what I learned was like with especially women in prison, there's the only motive is financial, or it's like, consequences of horrible abuse, intergenerational traumas. So there's so many underlying factors that really don't make anyone a criminal. They just want to survive. Yeah.
And that, I guess with that, like how have you seen some of the different forms of reform actually work for people? Like being able to work with some of the corporations, like, and knowing what goes on inside, and kind of like okay, hey, maybe you should consider this, or like, oh, like they're actually doing something and helping people, and people are like, oh, these guys are actually
Yeah.
decent.
Yeah. So in Hamilton, like I've worked with a couple stores that have been wanting to hire, and like they're smaller stores. So it's
Mhm.
actually a lot easier to work sometimes lately because I'm still learning a lot as well how this goes. Like I'm not by any means an HR professional, right? So I don't want to claim that I am. I just want to help make the connection and start changing the mindsets. And then it's really up to the person that wants the job, and then also like the understanding of the employer, right? And I think what that starts with is building a trust and not a judgment, like no judgment, right? Like so we have a
Right.
couple of staff internally, and they've struggled with certain things, or sometimes they need reminders for stuff, and like I need reminders for stuff, right? So it's like if you're struggling with something, a lot of companies will be like, we don't want to know, and that's you're basically not allowed to. It's shamed if you even choose to use illegal drugs or whatever. And
Mhm.
meanwhile, like if people choose to use illegal drugs, it's because they're struggling with something, right? Or as I've also seen in like big fancy corporations, people do drugs just to party. So what's the
Mhm.
difference, right?
Right. Right.
um, yeah, and so I think just being open and having that open kind of conversation, and instead of like having your business being like, oh, I'm the boss and you're here, like we're all like on the same like level playing field. And yeah, and then I've also seen my friend Sherry Garcia. So as an
Mhm.
example, she's actually out near you. She's in Texas.
Okay.
She has a whole organization called Cornbread Hustle.
Mm.
And she had kind of like, some incidents with the law back when she was younger, and issues with addiction. And so she started an entire agency based off like a recruitment agency that works specifically with people that have been incarcerated and helps find them placements. So what she does amazing work, and I kind of like study what she does, and so we can help implement those things internally, and then I can teach them to other people as well. So yeah,
Gotcha.
check it out, Cornbread Hustle.
I like that. I guess cornbread is definitely one of those southern staples, and it just seems like uh, if you do something good with food, you can usually reach people because it's like everybody eats, and if you make something good, everyone's you usually willing to, not everyone, but a lot of people are willing to just open up their heart a little bit if their stomachs are fed.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. It's I guess quick story. I remember visiting Belize. I visited earlier this year, but like maybe 4 years ago, I went for the first time, and
Belize?
was yeah,
Oh wow, I've always wanted to go there. Was it
it's
nice?
yeah, it's very nice. Like they've got it split up where you can land on the mainland, and then there are a couple islands that are more touristy, but some of the locals live there as well. But one of the guys was telling us that like for their reform program, like I'm sure everywhere does it a little bit differently, but at least for their program, it's like they have, if you want to go to school, if you want to like work towards a degree and things like that, that's something that's made available to you. But
Oh
like
really? In
you,
Belize? Oh, that's interesting.
yeah, but it's
Wow.
like you have to want to do it. And it
Yeah.
kind of reminded me similar to what someone else had said. It's like the the opportunity sometimes can be there, but you have to be willing to maybe do something on your own time and kind of like get out of your own way for a minute, depending
Yeah.
on either how you got there usually isn't always I mean it is important, but I guess for the sake of this example, it's like it's good to recognize where you're at and then think about how you can get yourself out of there rather than just being like, okay, I'm in a hole.
Yeah.
Then like
Yeah.
the sun goes down, the sun comes up, and you're like, I'm in a hole. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
well, you're in a hole. So you either need to find a ladder, call out to somebody, like look around, see what you can see to make your way out of there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I saw like so many people do well after prison, like just because we got a lot of us stay in touch, right? Like a lot of them like really want to see their kids again. So they're like, all right, I know I have to stay sober.
Mhm.
And it's just so, so great. I've seen a lot of people like get through, like do really successful recoveries, but I know that there's still a gap to help with like finding work for
Yeah.
sure. So
I guess, I mean, for I guess what could you say why is work so important for you? Like why was that such a big thing? Like for me, I guess I don't have a similar background, but like I worked for a bit, like coming out of school about 6 years, and then kind of took a break right before the pandemic. And just from being burnt out and just being like, maybe I don't need to work for a bit. But then after a while, it was like I needed to go back to work to actually like do something meaningful, whether it was working with my hands or just being around people, even
Yeah.
being introverted. It's like, oh, there's value here. It's not like
Yeah.
this. It's
Yeah.
not like the I don't know if they call it the C-suite deal where you're just in a high rise, but like no, you're working in a store or you're out in the middle of somewhere on your hands and knees, like looking at dirt
Yeah.
or
You learn
something like
different
that.
things. For me, I love learning. I've always been a very curious person, so there's like very few places that I won't go or explore. Like I'll go caving, right? I'll go to a farm and like milk a cow. I'll do a slaughter, I'll do like different kinds of crafts. I'll go to a sushi making class, right? It's
Hmm.
like I'll try different things, and that's why when I went to prison, I wasn't afraid because I knew that it was just all humans, and I would learn something about myself, about the culture, and what I wanted to change. And like I've always found beauty in like exploring and seeing what brings people like actual happiness, and so that's why I haven't been like that uh, concerned about like making millions of dollars, because I've seen so many people that are miserable like that.
Yeah.
And so when you actually do work that helps create things for the better, and you see change in others, or and how you change people's lives, like every other day I'm getting like a message or an email of how I'm helping people, and that is like the most richest feeling in the world. And so I guess that's why I do it. And I think that's just how we are mostly as humans. We're kind, like I think we're built to help others,
Yeah.
and we're also built to kind of need help from others. So um no one's gotten anywhere without the help of anyone else, right? And so I think that's kind of how we have to look at things. And yeah, that's kind of why I did. And it was also lived experience. It was something that no one could tell me I didn't know what I was talking about, because
Mm.
I was there. So yeah, exactly. I'm very aware of who I was when I got there, what I had before, what I have now, and what prison was like. And when you have a lived experience like that, no one can take it away from you. So yeah.
Great point. Great point. So I guess what's something you're looking forward to in this year? I know you mentioned earlier being able to go hang out with some friends.
Well, I think I don't know if I really look for things. I think I just fall into them.
Hmm.
But with the growth of this venture, and the impact that it's having, I know that good things are going to happen.
Hmm.
And like now that I'm done my parole, I can actually leave the province. So I definitely want to do more travel and like volunteer with more organizations. Eventually I want to go to prisons around the world and meet with them, or help them in any way that I can.
Yeah.
And yeah, because obviously it's not just Canada, it's not just the US. Like there are horrible things happening in prisons all over the world, and people need our help, and people also need to believe in themselves. And sometimes they don't get that belief because they either don't have a supportive system, or they've just been beaten down their whole life. So there's little ways where you can like just help others and help yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key to true happiness, really.
I guess what's one way people that are listening could actually help, say, their local prison, or just even be mindful of the people that are in your neighborhood, and not look down on people and just be like, oh, that person was this or that person did that.
Yeah. um I guess it depends on, because there's so many different ways that we can like change our mindset. But like say it can even start with reading an article in the newspaper about a crime. There's always two sides to every story, and the media often alters or enhances those stories so that they get written, even though a lot of it might not be true. And you never
Mhm.
hear the other side of the story, and you never hear what that person's life was like. You just hear about what they did wrong. So think twice about what you're reading in the media. And if you're a business owner, or if obviously some crimes are just crimes, and that's the
Yeah.
way that it is. Like when you see vandalism or whatever,
Right.
there are some crimes that are just destined to hurt other people, and you never really know. Like, I think there's things like that, and then there's like other crimes that are like maybe around drugs or like financial issues, whatever. So it's like think of like maybe what that person's like was before, or if you don't know it, don't assume that they did it for they did it for anything other than survival. And that is a lack in society. That's society's fault. That's not actually a personal fault, I don't think.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Like you said before, just be willing to be open, but don't be
Yeah.
naive.
And try to like do some research, read about prison reform, read the facts, read scholarly articles written from newspaper, or not newspaper, university academic newsletters, right? So
Right, right.
make sure you're getting information from the right source,
Mhm.
and try to learn. Like, always have a learning mindset.
Makes sense. How can people get in touch with you, whether it's online or offline, just to either learn more
Um,
about what you're doing and different things like that?
yeah, sure. So I can be reached at Emily@comebacksnacks.com. I can type it in the box for you. And then also just on Comeback Snacks on Instagram or Comeback Snacks on TikTok.
Awesome.
So yeah. There we go.
Got it. Okay, cool.
Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It was a pleasure having you.
Oh, I really appreciate the flexibility, and I hope you have a great. It's super hot out here today. It's like 35 degrees. So yeah.
Yeah, it's like, oh, that's right. You're here, let me stop for a second.